Alpha 36-801. Request descent to 6,000 feet.
6,000 feet, copy.
Descending to 6,000 feet. Vertical speed is on. Check LNAV. Heading. We will set heading 70 for landing. We could land to the opposite runway from the first demonstration flight. Jakarta approach Romeo Alpha 36-801. Request to make radar movement.
Orbit to the right, 6,000 feet, approached.
Sometimes the ground can be seen through the clouds. Alt star. But no problem, it's terrain at this moment. Yeah, it's flat. Make a request for right turn for approach. Do we make another orbit or return to heading? Do we make another orbit or return to heading? What? Do we make another orbit or make approach? We will make approach. Make request to Jakarta approach heading 20 and descend to 1600 feet for 40 AMI approach. Just request quickly. Okay.
Terrain ahead. Pull up. Avoid terrain. Avoid terrain.
What is that?
Avoid terrain. Avoid terrain.
Maybe database.
Gear not down.